Hey everyone, FusedVR coming at ya.
Hassan here.
And super excited today to be doing a VATS system in sort of Fallout style. Graphics are nowhere near that. I think the thumbnail is really well done. Abdo did an awesome job with that. So props to him. You've got your stream going. But yeah, just a few quick announcements before we get started. I wanted to say we're super excited to have Vincent Chen, who made a blog post on YC about how to get started with VR development. And he's coming on, and if you want to, you definitely can. We have a form here. It's in the description below. Go check it out, fill it out. It's a really quick survey, just so we can get in touch with you. And we'd love to just kind of spread the VR knowledge, share kind of what you've learned on the channel. I think one of the things that's really cool about this channel is it's a community type of thing. So getting the community involved in the actual videos, I think would be super awesome. So really excited to have him today, and hope to have you guys in the future. Also, a quick thing is Udacity is starting their first terms program, basically a giant cohort of students who actually learn VR together. I think it'll be a really cool experience. I'm still working there, and excited to talk about that. And if you have any questions, let me know in the chat. Third, if you're going to E3, I want to see you there. I'm going to be there Tuesday through Thursday, so basically all of the things. There's so many after parties I'm going to be at. It's going to be crazy. Going to love it. So let me know if you're going to be there.
Also, if you're not going, let us know what you want us to check out and report back on. We'll definitely be active on social media. So if you want to see something, definitely let us know that too.
Yep. I think that's it. I mean, let's just go. I think we can just dive straight into...
yeah, so I can talk about this. So as FusedVR mentioned, this is a prototype of one way that the VATS system could work out in Fallout VR. One of the tough things about this mechanic is it's hard to know exactly how much of an FPS Fallout VR will be. We took a very FPS-oriented approach, and we're gray boxing these models. So you can see that right here. I have this model. I can click to shoot it, and when I click the touchpad down, now I get my specific targeting, and I can also aim. And now I can see little trail renderers of where the bullets are going. And when I hit the touchpad again, I'll leave VATS mode. And I think eventually we also have a prototype of the bloody mess mechanic. For any of you that played Fallout, you know that at some point you get a perk where if you hit something, you have a random chance of something exploding rather than just being shot. So we have a few prototypes of that. We chose to skip out on the percentage system just right off the bat. But if you guys are really interested in seeing that, maybe towards the end of the stream we could implement that. It's pretty simple and straightforward. It's just a stylistic choice.
Yeah. You mentioned trail renderers. Yeah. I didn't see any here, but it'd be super cool to have.
Yeah, totally.
All right. With that,
all right, let's jump into this. And FusedVR will be in the chat.
Yep.
Abdo is also in the chat as Ghoster. And for those of you that don't know, whenever you see something pretty come out of our team, so whether that's a 2D graphic or 3D models, that's usually Abdo or Ghoster that's creating those. So if you have any questions about art for VR or anything like that, hit him up. So we're going to get started on this from scratch. Open up Unity. Call this VATS stream. Yeah, I think one of the most interesting parts about this project, as we said before, is that the Fallout series has changed a lot over the years. I mean, I think early on the game was, I think it was a bit of like a dungeon crawler or more of an RPG, and then they went to like the first-person shooter approach. While I'm talking about this, also I'm going to download the SteamVR plugin from the asset store. So we have SteamVR downloaded. Another thing that we're going to be using today is VRTK. This is what we'll use to highlight the different body parts. So let's import this into actually developing this thing. So first of all, to get started, as always, let's put the camera rig into this scene. And first, we're going to get the time mechanic working with turning VATS on and off. Then we'll move into shooting bullets. Then we can do the body targeting, and then at the end, if you guys really want to see it, we can jump into percentages and add some icing on the cake. We're planning on making this about like 30 to 45 minutes, but we'll see how it ends up. So I'm going to save this as, we'll call it VATS, or VATS test. And in the camera rig, we're going to be using the controllers to handle the touchpad and the trigger specifically to handle toggling VATS and shooting stuff. So let's go ahead and add a VATS handler to each hand. And the first thing that we need to do is just set up some basic controller hotkeys of what's going to happen when the touchpad gets clicked and the trigger. We might not need to use it, but there's also the grip. When I was prototyping, we did some stuff with that, but I don't think it'll pop up today. So let's create a reference to the controller device that's going to give us access to the controller inputs on the Vive controllers. So we'll call this controller, and we need to get a reference to that. We'll do it in start, so when this initializes, SteamVR control, oh, tracked. Autocomplete failing me. There we go. Call this. So we're just going to get a reference to the controller, which is a tracked object, and then later we're actually going to cast it as a controller. So we get the tracked object component. And then controller. So this is the part where we're casting this tracked object essentially to a device, like a controller device, and then we can get the key inputs. Index. And then now for actually monitoring those button presses, we'll do it in update. So if I always forget this boilerplate. SteamVR controller dot. I have it written out here. So you know that I always forget the syntax on this. So it's controller dot get, and we want get pressed down. So we just want to detect the first click of these things, or any click really. And then next it's controller button mask, and then we select the button that we're trying to get. So we're going to use the touchpad to toggle VATS mode. And then later on, we'll also be using the trigger for sure to shoot out the little spheres that represent bullets. There's always a lot of setup for just getting these things started. Okay, cool. So now we're ready to actually toggle VATS mode. So we'll write this function, and just to make sure that these are working actually, we'll start off by just doing some debug logs to make sure. This is something that you can do for testing. So toggle VATS. And here, shoot bullet. So without having the bullets implemented yet, it's going to be hard to see the time slow down for VATS. Like, we won't notice it because the physics simulations are going to be slowing down, but we still move through the space at the same rate because that's tied to our physical motion, not the physics simulations. So we'll add in a bouncing ball that just lets us see that the time is actually slowing down. So here's this toggle VATS function. And in this, we're just going to switch between different time scales. So let's create a variable that stores if VATS is on or not. We'll set it as false at first. Oh, forgot my boolean. There we go. So then, since we're toggling, we can just set VATS on equal to the opposite of whatever it currently is, and then we'll do our handling for whether or not it's on or off. Right now, this is just going to be as simple as changing the timescale. Later on, we might want to add in more stuff depending on how we extend this. So if VATS is on, we want to slow down time, and we do that via the timescale on this time component. So we're going to slow it down a lot to basically 10% of the standard passage of time. When timescale is at 1, time passes as normal. When it's at 2, it's going twice as fast. I really don't know what the limit on how high you could make it is, but that's something that could be fun to test. Not really relevant to VATS though. So if VATS is off, then like I was saying, we just set the timescale to 1. So now in Unity, we can pop in here and we'll create that bouncing ball so that we can see the time being toggled. There's my sphere. How's the chat going?
Good. We're talking about exercise in VR.
How did we get on the topic of exercise in VR from?
Crazy gamer building a bike VR sim.
Nice.
And so we're like talking about sweat. Sweat leads to exercise.
Wow, I don't know how in a VATS first-person shooter tutorial we got into exercise, but I guess, I mean, it brings up the point with Fallout, they need to decide how they're going to do locomotion. Like, with such a vast open world, I mean, what is it going to be? Is it going to be a lot of running in place? Is it going to be click to teleport? Are you going to be walking mostly? Maybe hotspots? I'm not really sure. But yeah, exercise, even if you don't want it to be a big part of your experience, sometimes it just ends up happening that way. So now I just created a physics material. I'm going to name it bouncy because we're going to make it bounce. So I'm turning down the friction. I'm going to turn the bounciness up to 1. The friction will be a minimum. This friction combine determines when this object hits another, how are their friction values combined. We're going to make it a minimum of the objects that are colliding. And for bounciness, we want to make it a maximum. So basically we're getting the least amount of friction from the colliding objects, and then the maximum amount of bounciness from either of the colliding objects. So once we've configured that, we just drag this physics material onto the collider. So it's right there. And we should be able to see this working in VR. So let me get these controllers. Turn them on. So I think the bouncing ball is behind me. Yeah, so now it's bouncing normal speed. I'm about to click the touchpad, and we see that time slows down. It's actually pretty cool to see. Then when I hit the touchpad again, time is back to normal. So we already have the slow down mechanic in there, but we actually need to start doing stuff with it, and that's what we'll jump into now. Let's shoot some bullets at this thing. So here, let's see, going to want to just shoot the bullet. Yeah, we'll start off with just shooting it, and then we'll go from there and build more on top of this. So we first need to create a prefab that's going to represent the bullets that we're shooting, and we're just going to use basic spheres for this. So I'm going to scale this down. And it's going to need a rigid body so that it can collide with objects, but we don't want to use gravity. On a real bullet, I mean, maybe you do want to use gravity in your games, but for this one, we just want this bullet to fly in a straight line until it hits something. Let's also create a material for it. Here's where, if you have a really awesome modeler like Abdo, you could get them to create a true bullet. This week he has a lot of other stuff that he's working on for our team, and we're working on together, so we skipped making an actual bullet for this live stream. So there's that. Now we need to create the behavior that is going to be on this bullet. So it has a rigid body on it. We're going to need to get a reference to that in the start function and then apply a force that drives this bullet forward. So it's actually pretty straightforward. You can just do game object, get component, rigid body, and then I can do rigid body.add force, and we need to specify a direction for this force. We're just going to use the forward direction of this bullet. We're going to be spawning it wherever we click our controller. Later on, like if you wanted to flesh this out, you could create a gun model and put a transform wherever you want to be spawning these bullets, and then use that as the where you determine the forward direction. Transform.forward, and so transform.forward is just going to point in the forward direction, and that will be a vector that has a magnitude of 1, but we need to scale that up because we don't want this to just represent a direction. We want this vector to be a value that represents the strength of the force. So for now, let's try something like, I don't know, 100 as a scaling force for this, but we'll see. We might have to tweak that later on. It depends on how the physics of everything lines up. So we have the force. This should fly in the forward direction. We also want to handle what happens when this hits something. So we'll use on collision enter. So here, all we need to do for now is actually just destroy the game object of this bullet. So once we hit something, we destroy the bullet itself. So let's jump back to Unity. That's a basic prototype of the bullet, at least for now. I'm actually going to scale it down just a little bit more. And we can save it as a prefab just by dragging it into the assets section. So now we have that. We need to configure our VATS handler to have an instance or a reference to that prefab so that we can instantiate them when we click down the trigger. So use a public outlet for that. Public bullet. What's a good name for this? Bullet prefab. And then what we'll do in here is we just instantiate that bullet prefab. And we need to give it the position and also a rotation. So we'll just use the rotation that the controller has and the position of the controller. Now this is a little bit of a cool trick that I actually only found out about recently. If we, like, one way that you can instantiate prefabs is you can instantiate the prefab itself. So instead of using a bullet or the script outlet, you could change this to a game object and give a reference to the game object. But I like to do it this way because if you do it this way, you can actually get a reference to the script on the game object that you're going to spawn. So I can instantiate the game object and get a reference to a specific script on that game object in one line of code. So that's just a quick tip if you're interested. So that should be it. We just need to link up this in the inspector and then we can test it out. Then let's turn this one off and let's see if we can shoot these bullets out. Yep. So I see everything here. Nothing is spawning though, so looks like we might have an error. Bullet is shooting. Oh, I see what happened. So I turned off the bullet in the scene, and then it ended up turning off the bullet. It disabled the game object when we spawn it. So let's get rid of this one from our scene, and the bullet is still configured correctly. Okay. So no bullet was instantiated there. Oh, I see. So we need to drag the reference from the assets panel, not from that bullet that we had before. So that's why we had that issue with the thing spawning as disabled. Here we go. You see that I'm spawning these bullets. And right now they're going too slowly. That's because the force that I'm applying is not big enough. We need to make that a lot bigger. So let's put it up 2 orders of magnitude and check out how that works. Yeah, that was much better. So what's cool about this is it looks like they're going fast enough to see them in non-VATS mode, which is actually pretty good. I mean, it's nice in games, like you should be able to see your bullets, even though that's not realistic. Or I guess not in every game, but in a lot of games, you want to be able to see your bullets. Definitely in Fallout, you see your bullets. But then when we're in VATS mode, they travel a little bit slower. And then once we toggle out of VATS mode, we can aim at it and then toggle back into normal mode. Alright, so we have timescales working, we have the bullets working. Now let's actually talk about highlighting body parts. So the first thing that I'm going to do is get rid of this sphere, or we can keep it here for reference, but we'll create a dummy that we use instead. I also want to check how the chat's going. I'll ask FusedMan once he gets back. But let's see, so I'm going to create a basically like a small version of a rigged model. The reason why I'm doing this is it's easier to just create a dummy with this than it was using anything that I found on the asset store. But if you want, you totally could use something on the asset store. We recommend Space Robot Kyle. That is pretty easy to set up a rig for, and if you want to see how to set up a rig on a 3D model, check out our live stream on boxing in VR. We do it in that one. Here, and then the last part is to just add some joints to all of this, and we're going to keep it really basic. We'll just use fixed joints for all of them. So we want to, actually all of these need a rigid body. They should have a rigid body because I was duplicating the objects. And so for the fixed joint of this, we want to connect it to the body. Then the body should actually have 4 fixed joints because it's going to have all of the limbs on it.
Question from Mike, who was asking which asset you were using.
Which asset?
Yeah.
The
question specifically is what did he say that asset was?
Oh, Space Robot Kyle. If you want to get a more high fidelity rig, you can use Space Robot Kyle. It's free on the Unity Asset Store. A problem that we had with it is that the skinned renderer on it wasn't working very well for our collisions, but it is a really cool asset. Definitely one that we've used in the past, and again, if you want to see how to rig it up, just check out our boxing live stream, and FusedMan shows it there. So now I'm just connecting all of these limbs to the actual body, and this is why you would use why you would want to use a rigging system rather than doing this manually. This is kind of a pain, but it's easier, at least for testing. So let's see, when I hit play, is this thing gonna fall over? I hope not. Nice. Okay, so it doesn't fall over. Have that there. getting trouble with the trackers. So there is the model, and I'm gonna try shooting a bullet at it. You guys can see that with and without VATS. So now VATS is on. Oh, my controller's not tracking. There we go. So you can see that we can already shoot this thing, and it's, I mean, physics and Unity are just fun. Even without doing anything complicated, it's cool to see them. So that's just shooting it without any VATS. And now I'll toggle on VATS. Oh, it looks like it went through the object on one of them. That was just a physics bug. Alright, so to really show that like VATS is on and off, what we can do now is actually target the limbs and highlight what we're pointing at. And that's why earlier in the stream I asked everybody to download VRTK from the asset store, because VRTK has some awesome assets in it. Really great package of VR interactions and stuff to use. So specifically we're going to use, well, I can show you, I think it's in basic object grabbing. There's an example of how you can highlight objects when you grab them. We're going to tweak this a little bit so that we can highlight body parts when we aim at them. So see, looks like something's not working right. Oh, so to get VRTK all set, we need to go into this. Actually, everything looks good here. Looks like we're having an issue with VRTK. So StoneFox, if you could help out right now, that would be super nice. The variable actual headset VRTK SDK manager has not been assigned. Oh, there we go. So you gotta auto-populate the linked objects. I thought I had hit that already. Oh, I hit it in play mode. No, you can't see my controller right now, but when I hover it over these objects, you see that some of them highlight, and that's what we're going to be leveraging to highlight different parts of that body that we created when we aim at them.
Everyone says to use the GitHub version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We ran into that last time too. Alright, cool. So let's copy this VRTK object and go back to our scene. So we copy that in, make sure that everything is all set up, and what we need to add to all of these objects, I think it's the interactable object in VRTK that does the, lets us do the highlighting. Yep, there it is. And we can decide what the highlight color is. We're going to use green. That's what they use for VATS. And at a high level, what we want to do here is from our controllers, when we're in VATS mode, we want to do a raycast to see if we hit a body part, and then if we do hit a body part, we want to toggle on the highlight. And then when we leave that body part, we want to toggle it off. So that's what we're going to be setting up next. How's the chat going?
Good. We were just talking about the VRTK version.
Haha. Right, cool. So here, what we'll do is if, let's see, where should this go? So I'm trying to figure out where to do the raycast. If VATS is on, then what we want to do is execute raycast. We'll create that in another function. So we need to get a hit object. That's what we're going to use to store the result of whatever our raycast hits. and we're going to actually do the raycast in this if statement so that if we hit something, this will return true. If we don't hit something, it returns false. Now for the raycast, we need to give it, I believe it's the position, also the direction that we want to cast the ray in, so that's forward from wherever the controller is, and then we want to store a reference via that hit variable. So now, let's see, we only want to highlight objects that have that interactable on them, so that's what we'll do next. Let's get a reference to whatever we hit. So the hit variable, or the raycast hit, has a collider, and we can use that to access the game object. And then if object, if it has one of the VRTK interactables, then we're going to proceed with highlighting it. But in order to use VRTK in this, we need to declare that's part of our namespace that we'll be using for this script. So here we go. If, once again, if hit object dot get component interactable object, so if it has an interactable object, then this returns true. And then if it doesn't, what we're going to want to do is toggle off if we had a previous object that we were targeting. So we're going to need a variable to store a reference to whatever we are targeting with the controller. So we will use VRTK object. We'll call this cur body part. So then here, let's get a reference to whatever we're currently pointing to. So we can get that from the interactable. And then so new body part, what we'll do is we'll toggle on the highlight. This isn't going to be complete, but just want to show you that like this should be, like, the highlight should work. There's going to be some bugs. Specifically, I think everything will turn on if we point at them individually, and they won't turn off. So that's why we have this else statement and some other logic that we have to add in for. But we've been coding for a while, so let's just make sure that everything's working so far. On VATS mode, so you'll see the sphere slow down. And then when I click it, when I point at the head, it highlights, the arm highlights, the body highlights, other arm, leg, leg. So like I was saying before, they're not turning off. That's why we need a reference to the body part that we are pointing to, and we need to add some stuff into that if-else statement that we added. So here, what we'll do is if the new body part is not the same as the old body part, actually let's name these a little bit better for clarity. So we'll call this previous body part, and we'll call this one, this is the same one, so previous body part. If they're not the same, what we want to do is turn off the previous body part, because we're not pointing at it anymore. Now we're pointing at a different body part. Then we can set the new body part to be highlighted, and we can set the previous body part to be equal to the new body part. We have the same type of logic that we need to add in here, but now what we need to check is if we haven't hit anything, is there a previous body part? If there is, then we need to turn it off and set it to null. Body part is not equal null. Turn the highlight off. So what do people want to see most? We're getting towards the end. I think that one cool thing could be to add in the explosion. That's like one perk that you get in Fallout is it's called Bloody Mess, I think, where if you hit a body part, you have a random chance of just exploding the whole thing. So we could do that. We could look into what a percentage system might look like. We can undo the bullets. Let us know in the chat. And we'll decide also based on how much time we have, because each of those things takes a different amount of time. So
Fox wants explosions.
alright, explosions, that's what it is. That's the one that I wanted to do too, so we're gonna go with that. If you want to see something else, just leave a note in the comments on the video, or you can message it in the chat if you're following along right now, and maybe maybe we could follow up with a separate video where we show you how to do that. So toggle the highlight, just turning it off, and then setting the previous body part to null. So now, since the previous body part can be null, I need to, actually I think that should be it. I do have to warn you guys though, there's not going to be any blood on this this explosion. Oh, I think that's what went wrong. Why did I set the origin as, how did the origin get set to be a bullet on one of these? I don't know when that happened, but that I think was the root of why the controllers might not have been working. Maybe it wasn't a tracking issue after all, but we'll see. So now I go into VATS mode, so let's steer slow. I'll point at that. Looks like this isn't working. So there's a null reference exception. Let's see where that's popping up. Oh, I see. So it's popping up if we're trying to access the previous body part, but we don't have a previous one, then this is where the null reference exception is coming from. Essentially, we're doing toggle highlight on a null object. That won't work.
Disappointed there's no blood.
Yeah, I thought that you guys might be, but sorry. I mean, we're giving you the building blocks. If you guys want to add in blood, feel free to do it.
You can make a white blood. Just throw a particle in there. You can make it like rain coming out. It's not
Sure. Controller. So there's no highlighting right now. I'm in VATS mode because I clicked the pad. So you see that now you can see that as I point around, I'm aiming at different body parts, and I'm getting feedback by what has highlighted and what is not highlighted. Weird thing is that that one doesn't seem to be turning off very easily. Not sure why that's oh, I think it's because of the other controller. Yeah, it's not sure where this one is in the scene. Looks like I'm still having that bug. But with this controller that's working, you can see that as I point around, I get those objects. I got getting down to the wire on this, so let's handle the actual bullet explosion. So this is pretty simple. All we need to do is on the collision of the bullets, we're going to set a percentage, and if we like with a certain randomness level that we can decide, we'll apply an explosion force, and we need to make that big enough to break the joints that are on the different parts of the body. So let's go over to the bullet. Right now we're going to make this happen every time. So we're going to use random.range to generate a random number. We'll generate one between 0 and 1. And if that's less than, we want like this is where the probability should be. So we'll call this bloody mess probability. We'll set that to 1 for right now. Then we need to actually do this explosion This is another thing that's pretty boilerplatey, so I'm gonna look this up. I think Unity add explosion force. It's this one. There's code here that we can just riff off of. And I'll walk through what this code does. So this first one, this first line just gets the position of the explosion. Next, we get all of the colliders that are in a sphere of a radius that we determine. So let's declare a variable for that. We're going to make this huge just so that we can make sure we get all of the different limbs. Later on, you would want to configure this to only apply to the right limbs, though, because as is, it will just hit any collider, and you could end up exploding something that you didn't even shoot. Not a good idea, especially if they're like exploding barrels or something. But for a prototype, definitely works. Now, power is going to be tricky. We need this power to be big enough to overcome the force of those joints. So we're going to have to play with this a little bit to see what works best. So then what this is doing is just iterating through all of the colliders that were in the sphere of the radius that we chose, and then if they have a rigid body, if that game object from the collider has a rigid body, then we add an explosion force to the rigid body. So jump back to Unity, and just for some logging, so we can make sure that this is working, log trigger body mess. So I'm going to turn on VATS. And then shoot the head. I don't think that happened there. It wasn't enough to break the joints, because by default they come with infinite strength. So I'm going to turn those down. Make the break force, I don't know, something like 100. Again, these are values that you have to tweak just depending on the masses that you use for the rigid bodies and how much you shoot the bullet and so on. So here comes the shot. Something's up with this controller.
Okay, this is actually probably really late in the tutorial to say this, but we're using Unity 5.5.1, not 5.6.
Yeah. Want stability. So VATS is on. Shooting the head. Well, the head came off. The rest of it didn't. So that definitely did the explosion force, because you could see that my second bullet got deflected, but it wasn't enough to break these. So let's see. Oh, I think it's because I put it on the, oh darn, I put it on the rigid bodies instead of the joints, that's why. Where are the joints? So the break force is what we want to toggle. We have these all connected to this body piece. Alright, now let's see if this works. You see that the hands just fell off immediately, so they need a bigger break force. Right now I think gravity is breaking them. So we'll probably edit this part out of the stream. It's just really a matter of getting into like seeing what numbers work. So I'll just keep messing around with these until we get something that fits, and then in the final video you guys will see whatever magic numbers we came up with. So the numbers that we ended up going with were about 10,000 on the brake force for the different limbs, and then the explosion force that we use is, oh, this is a big number, we got about 1,000,000 there. And so here we'll show the effect again. Right now 100% of the shots are triggering the bloody mess. So it should work on the first try. Here's VATS mode, where we're targeting the different body parts. Hit that thing, boom. Now I'm going to turn off VATS, and everything flies in a different direction.
That's
So,
awesome.
Yeah.
So cool.
So parts that we didn't implement will follow up in one of the written blogs that we do are the percentage system. We can definitely talk about that. It's actually surprisingly easy. Then what else? I mean, we didn't add any blood. We could add blood. Maybe somebody could do that for us and you could post it. But yeah, I think that's
honestly, I can get Abdo to do a GIF with you shooting at it, and then just
and then overlay some. Yeah, let Abdo do it. I don't want to do any blood stuff. Here, we'll even call this trigger bloody. Alright, there we go. So I think, yeah, that's it. To summarize, what we started with was manipulating the time scale. After that, we shot some bullets. Then we made it so that we could highlight objects, and we added in bloody mess. And you can check out the blog where we'll talk about what a percentage system would look like if you want to do one of those. I don't think that it works that well in VR, but it's a possibility. Anything that you want to add in, FusedMan?
No, I mean, I think it's awesome. If you guys have questions about anything, definitely leave a comment on it. And with that, I think we can jump into this interview. If you guys want to join these sessions, interviews, whatever you want to call them, I think we're going to call them creator chats.
Yeah.
Definitely fill out the form in the description. We're gonna work on fixing a few things. I'm noticing right now there's this weird sparkly glitter that's happening over.
That's just the aura of Vincent.
Yeah, it's the Vincent's aura.
You guys don't see it, but it's actually a halo.
But yeah, we'll work on fixing a few things. But I think it's super informative for the community to have conversations like this. What we'll do after the stream is we're going to cut these into 2 separate videos. So we'll have one that's the dev side, one that's the actual creator chat. I think that'll be super cool. Expect that coming out in the next couple days. And yeah, thanks again, Vincent, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So yeah, that pretty much does it for the live stream today. Super exciting stuff. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe or like the video. That helps us out a ton. You can also follow us on social media if you want to get any of the previews about anything we're doing. Like Hassan put this interesting whiteboard post a couple days ago on hinting about VATS. It was kind of confusing.
It was tough. It was intentionally difficult, but
Yeah.
we'll have more teasers of what we're going to be doing that week and opportunities for people to contribute to.
Yep. And we'll get Stone Fox on next time.
Yep.
But that does it for today. So this has been FusedMan.
And Hassan here.
Hi,
Vincent.
I'm Vincent.
We're signing out.
Absolutely. That was a lot of fun, guys.